Trust in our institutions in the United States is at an all-time low that is across the board. Trust in the media is at an all-time low. Trust in church is at an all-time low. Trust in the scientific establishment is at an all-time low. Trust in government is at an all-time low. And of course, trust in academia is at an all-time low. And because of our lack of trust in institutions, Americans also mistrust one another. Your university shapes you. And as we lose faith in all of those institutions to shape us, we are incapable of coming together anymore.
That was conservative commentator Ben Shapiro answering a broader question that many Americans wonder about today. Why does it feel like we are more divided than ever? And as you heard there, Shapiro believes the answer is simple. Our institutions are failing us as Americans. A lot to unpack over the next hour. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Emily Compagno here with my co-host, Kayleigh McEnany. And also joining us today, Arthel Neville, Fox News anchor, Kennedy, host of the Kennedy Saves the World podcast, and Marcus Lemonis, businessman, Fox News contributor, and host of The Fixer on Fox Business and Fox Nation. Now, Shapiro then shifted his focus on how to rebuild public trust in major institutions during a time where he says society feels increasingly divided.
The first book that I wrote was a book called Brainwashed: How Universities Indoctrinate America's Youth. That book was written in 2004. Okay, and that book was all about liberal indoctrination on college campuses. I was at UCLA at the time. I was a junior when I wrote it. And not much has changed, except that it's gotten, in many ways, worse. And that happened because professors decided, back in the 1960s, essentially, professors and administrators decided.
And a new report out of Yale is taking aim at America's most elite colleges, arguing that the Ivy League has helped fuel its own image problem. This from the Wall Street Journal. A new Yale internal report carries a message for the campus. Check liberal bias, introduce more merit in admissions, and reduce preferences for legacies. Bottom line, the Ivy League's biggest critics may be coming from inside their own house. Well, that sounds like a screen tease, but I'm going to go first to Kennedy here because UCLA is your alma mater, too. So your thoughts?
Fred and I were there at the same time. I just realized his timeline. I was a junior when he was a junior. I graduated in 05. Four's up, although UCLA, you're being horrible, fanning the flames of anti-Semitism, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Anyhow.
So his message presenting that institutions are sort of the cause of division here, but ending on the hope that there's a little bit of self-correction potentially in the works, but also what we can do as Americans to resist that attempt for division. That's a hard haul right now.
It really is. And, you know, a part of it comes from examining our own lives and our own relationships and whether or not we reach out to people who might have a different political point of view. Like, that starts with every individual. That starts within our own families because we've allowed our families to be fractured. But also, I view academia the same way I view Hollywood. You know, these are two areas where you have to whisper if you have a different political stripe. I was talking to an A-list film actor not long ago who said, I love you guys on Fox, but I can never go on any of your shows because if I do, I'll never be able to work again. And it's the same thing in academia. You have to go along with the groupthink if you want your papers published, if you someday want to be a tenured professor. And unfortunately, they're beholden to these institutions who have really given order to corner the market on their worldview, which, it is crumbling. And that Yale study it's all about self-preservation. And these professors want to make sure that they have jobs in the future, but they won't if people stop paying $400,000 for a degree where they're just being propagandized.
So, Kayleigh, part of the argument of the institutions failing us and the fact that the call is coming from inside the house is potentially the rise of other institutions to combat, and that comes with school choice. That comes with parents being empowered to have control over their child's education, their child's indoctrination, and to resist as well at the school board level, at this young level, when institutionalization sort of has the genesis there. So talk to us about the rising forces that are going to be the good institutions to keep back the bad ones.
Yeah, I think the way you combat this is external and internal pressure. External being that there are other institutions. We live in a supply and demand society. And seeing the fact that SEC schools, I was reading a 2025 report on Fox News Digital, have seen a 50% increase in applications, and it's outpacing growth in the region, that's sending a message that people are looking for alternatives. Both my parents went to SEC schools. They're wonderful institutions, places like Vanderbilt, University of Florida, and elsewhere, great schools. So that puts pressure on institutions. But here's where some people disagree with me, but I feel passionately about this, is reforming the institutions that exist. I'm a very proud Harvard Law graduate. I loved my time there. It's so rich in history when you walk around. I was immediately drawn to it as a young girl. People may not realize, when Harvard was founded? 1636.
Before the country started.
Before the country started by the Massachusetts Bay Colony Legislative. Very liberal professors. This was self-identifying faculty. 31.8%. Liberal, 45.3%. You add that together and you're above 76% of faculty saying we're liberal or very liberal. Moderate, 20%. Conservative, 2.5% of Harvard professors identifying as conservative. Very conservative, 0.4%. So the other ideology is represented by 3% of the faculty, according to this 2023 survey. And you know who that fails? The liberal activists on campus, many of whom I went to school with. When you go to a classroom and your ideology is reinforced, you don't learn. You don't learn how to defend your point of view. You don't learn how to engage in civil discourse. So to reform the institutions, you've got to diversify the ideological thinking of the faculty. I want to see Harvard succeed. I want it to be a place where I say, Blake, apply to that school. But we've got to see some fixes, and I'm glad to see Yale having this internal kind of come to Jesus about some of the problems.
Yeah, well, as the DH attorney said, who got shouted down at UCLA, he said, you just deprived the students of the opportunity to learn. Arthel, your thoughts?
And then here's the problem with all of this. What happens is conspiracies are allowed to breed in this environment. And when you're constantly told the news is fake, elections are rigged, you should dismiss someone because they don't look like you. That's a problem. So I think what we need is, let's call it a coalition of collectives. People from academia, political leaders, people from the military, law enforcement, military, as I said, traditions, institutions that are steeped in structure and service. Because if you look at it this way, right, if you have a top-heavy container sitting on a fractured foundation, we all collapse. So we must get back to our shared values of
stitch it together with a red thread. And what we didn't say enough of is, where have the facts gone? Education, business, media, social media are based on facts. And I think facts is now diametrically opposed to philosophy. And so when we think about the kind of curriculum or the kind of professors that we have, they seem to be moving into philosophy. And the last time I remembered, philosophy classes were electives. They weren't core curriculum. But when I go
have a
into
degree in philosophy.
Yeah, I know. We talk about it all the time.
They were your core.
But you have a degree in it, but you were still rooted in the facts of math and science and geography and history. And when you abandon those principles as the core principle of education, you abandon this idea that facts don't matter. And I love the idea of having an open debate. You and I don't agree on everything, but we can respect each other. And what we don't do is we don't ignore the facts. Yes. And that's what's missing in business, in media, in a lot of different places. And so when you see people moving away from higher education, you have parents and alumni now saying, I don't want to pay for you to philosophize with my kid. I just need them to know how to be an engineer. Not the philosophy behind engineering. Are they an engineer or are they not? And that's what's missing for me.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to you? As many in these undergraduate environments, they argue over the facts. So while I think those of us growing up, it was quite clear, but here it seems that aside from engineering and math and places where I feel like it's inarguable, I don't know, I didn't do so well in those classes.
2 + 2 is 4.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So we're clear.
So in degrees like mine, political science, religious studies, anything that has a place in this world, but isn't so black and white as math, like how do you see the students faring there when the faculty does have an influence over what they are saying to the student? This is a fact, but really it's not.
It's the recognition of history. History is not subjective. It's what it is. How you want to move forward and learn from history and learn from the mistakes are different. And we can talk about forming ideas or forming perspectives on going forward, but it doesn't eradicate what happened yesterday. And I think that's what's missing for me more than anything. And it happens in business all the time. We're not learning from our mistakes. We're ignoring them, saying, well, that didn't really happen. That isn't what they really meant or intended. And that, for me, is where the big problem is.
DOJ indictment as investigations into his tenure deepen. Trump versus Iran. Tensions escalate as the U.S. weighs the first-ever deployment of Dark Eagle hypersonic missiles following an $800 million oil scheme bust that squeezed Tehran's finances. WHCD investigation. The suspect in the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting, Cole Allen, is on 2 4-hour lockdown and remains in custody as new photos from the incident emerge. 2026 midterm election updates. Primary fallout. President Trump has called Senator Bill Cassidy very disloyal, urging Louisiana voters to replace him. Voter roll cleanup. Experts are criticizing resistance to common sense cleanup efforts after 34,000 deceased individuals were reportedly found on voter rolls. California governor's race. Candidates are intensifying their campaigns as the primary season heats up in the Golden State. Business and tech. Elon Musk testimony. Musk has concluded his testimony in the high-profile trial against OpenAI. Inflation spike. A key inflation gauge has